Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, February 29th, the last day of the month. It's Leap Day. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Daniel is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick little program note. Tomorrow in our third hour, Sibel Edmonds will be our guest to talk about her new project, Newsbud, which is not the name of the sleigh in Citizen Kane, but it is the name of her new media project. She's trying to crowdfund an independent media network to basically stand up to the corporate networks, and obviously all of us are hoping that this can be done. It is high time that there was an independent media network with the resources of the corporate networks to stand up to them and say, you lie, you lie, you lie. Now, before we get into the heavy news, fun little story. We heard this last year, and we're hearing it again today, okay? Down in the Antarctic, the Aurora Australis, okay, got stranded in the sea ice last Wednesday. And apparently this is the icebreaker which helped rescue Turney's Ship of Fools, the one that went down there and said, we're going to prove the ice is melting and the world is warming, and it got stuck. And this is the icebreaker which rescued them. Now it's stuck in the ice. And this is an icebreaker. This is a ship that is supposed to be able to deal with the ice, and it is icebound, which is my way of segueing into Donald Trump and his meteoric rise to popular vote stardom, because he's out there being very honest about things that we know we've been lied to for decades. Donald Trump's opinion of global warming exactly matches mine. It is a hoax, a con job. And he's used other words that I cannot use on this radio station without the FCC coming in and starting to yank cables out of the transmitters. But that's why everybody likes Trump. He's telling the truth. He's giving his honest opinion. He's not hopping on board all of these hoaxes and agendas to trick us out of our freedoms, our money, and the lives of our children in wars of conquest. Now, for some reason, the powers that think they are have decided that they are going to make racism the issue with which they're going to try and defeat Donald Trump. And they seized on an incident where David Duke, former member of Congress, former head of the KKK, and now is basically a scholar, and he's a very smart man. We've had him here on the show. And again, don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but he's got a right to say it. Well, basically, David Duke came out with a comment saying that, you know, people who are voting along these candidates to open up our borders and legalize the illegal immigrants, they're basically voting against the people of our own nation. That was immediately seized upon by the pro-immigration people. Oh, it's a racist. See, he's the former KKK and he's endorsing Trump, and Trump has got to denounce him, blah, blah, blah. And they have been just pounding this issue that Donald Trump refuses to disconnect from David Duke. He refuses to denounce the KKK. And David Duke has come out with a video response saying, this is what I actually said, guys. But, of course, that never stopped the corporate media from going out on their flights of fancy. The reality is that David Duke did not explicitly endorse Donald Trump to begin with, and Trump has basically already distanced himself from this comment twice. But the corporate media is out there saying, he's a racist, he's a racist, he's a racist, you can't vote for the racist, blah, blah, blah. And we know this is all part of a dirty trick, political trick. Remember, down during the Nevada caucus, they had guys in KKK robes and carrying signs, I support Donald Trump. And the big mistake was that at least one of the people in the KKK robes was themselves black. They weren't wearing gloves. So you had the KKK robe and the I Love Trump sign and black guy's hands holding it. I mean, it looked like a scene out of Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles. That's how absurd this thing was. But it tells you this is all contrived and manufactured. Now, here's where it gets really good. Over on MSNBC, Tamron Hall was attempting to smear Donald Trump supporters as a bunch of racists. If you support Donald Trump, you're a racist. And basically teased into a new segment saying we're going to show you what some of Donald Trump supporters are really saying. And rather than cut to one of these phony KKK people, the control room cut to a clip featuring a black Trump supporter named Frank Vick, who praised Donald Trump and attacked the media for trying to divide Americans along racial lines, which is exactly what Tamron Hall and her guests were trying to do. CNN has gone on the attack on Trump's aide, Katrina Pearson. Yeah, of course Donald Trump likes Pearson. She cleans up his mess. The implication that she's, domestic help rather than a political aide. Have you ever in your lifetime seen a candidate that the establishment was so terrified of as they are of Donald Trump? And what we're seeing here, this is a war between the political establishment and the corporate media and we the people over who is going to decide the direction this country is going. The political establishment is desperate to prove they're still calling the shots, and you will just sit quietly there and accept the leaders they give you. The corporate media is desperate to prove they can convince you that you want the selected candidate. Because when they can't do that, all that funding, corporate funding, is going to dry up. They're losing money hand over fist. Corporate news media, especially at the network level, they're not making money. They're having to be propped up, and the only reason they're being propped up is on this illusion that they are still in control of your mind. And they will tell you to vote for Hillary Clinton, and you will obediently vote for Hillary Clinton. As a matter of fact, no, we won't, which isn't going to stop her because she's going to steal it with the superdelegates. She's already been caught with election fraud. And by the way, walking around here, we know there's a lot of people in the media and online who are singing Hillary's praises, and they're being very generously paid for it. But just walk around and talking to people. I mean, this is a fairly heavy Democratic state that I'm in. I can't find an ordinary person who thinks Hillary is worth voting for. There's Sanders' campaign all over. They're out there with the placards and everybody's cheering them. They love my Hillary for Prison t-shirt. I cannot find hardly any normal, non-politically paid operative that seems to think Hillary should be voted for. When you read the venom that is out there being directed at her on the comment sections on the corporate media, you cannot reconcile that feedback on Hillary with the numbers she claims to be getting. And by the way, it is a giveaway. Bernie Sanders' job is to make it look like the Democratic voters have some kind of a choice in the primaries. They don't. Or he would have sent his lawyers after the very obvious fraud seen in Iowa and New Hampshire. He's just there playing a role, and his reward is he will get to be vice president. That's what's going on down there. Now, former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Michael Hayden, is saying that if you vote for Donald Trump as president, the military will refuse to obey his orders. That's how bad a president he will leave the country weak because the military will refuse his order. Hayden, I guess, is having this idea that, if the Mongol hordes were pouring across the border from Canada and the president said protect our borders, that the military so hate Trump that they would sit down and let the Mongol hordes flood into the country. I don't personally see that as happening, but if you really think about it, Hayden is encouraging treason or a full-on military coup against Trump. And again, I have never in my lifetime seen a single candidate that struck such fear into the heart of the political and economic and media establishment. It's going to be an interesting year. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And do you remember the Hobby Lobby case went all the way to the Supreme Court? Big stink about how Christian-owned businesses could reject the birth control mandate, and how the owner of Hobby Lobby was just vilified and demonized. How dare you do it? Now they're citing him as a source on Fox News as to why you should never vote for Trump. They're getting desperate. They are getting so desperate. In fact, it's time to call a flood warning in Washington, D.C. from all the sweat that's pouring off the establishment politicians. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a couple of phone calls here. Robert in Missouri, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just saw Sean King, the young, disgraced Black Lives Matter, racially confused Soros apparatchik, just tweeted out. Here's where they're going to segue the Duke thing. He's tweeting out that Donald Trump's father in the past was arrested at a Klan riot. So now all the mainstream corporate media guys, they're going to try to attach Donald Trump's pop with the Klan. And, well,
that's a very effective media tactic, because my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-uncle fought on the side of the Confederacy. Of course, I had all these other great-great-uncles that fought on the side of the Union, but by golly, you've got a family member that was in the Confederacy, and that's it. You know something? I have a feeling that whatever this happened at this probably happened before Donald Trump was born, and even if he was a little kid, it's not like Donald Trump could turn around and say, Dad, you ought not to do that.
Well, and then this is what's funny. You guys,
Daddy, you're fired.
I've got pictures of Mr. Obama with Malik Zulu Shabazz of the new Black Panther Party, who openly calls for the murder of white people. And Obama can invite the Black Lives Matter people into the White House to have meetings, and he gets a free pass. And then Farrakhan can call him the Messiah, and nobody asked him to distance himself from Louis Farrakhan or any of that side of the house. But
that's because Obama isn't running for re-election. He's had his 2 terms in office. He's getting ready to retire. This is all about get Trump. Forget everything else. We have to get Trump. And like I said, I have never, in all my years, seen a candidate who just instilled such fear and loathing and terror in the establishment as Donald Trump. And I think it's a healthy thing. I really think it's a healthy thing. I think it's time this establishment got a real good shake-up and a good dose of humble.
Hey, and one more thing, Mike. By Trump saying that the whole climate change, world control agenda is bogus, he's going right up against Pope Francis in his Laudato Si latest encyclical, which talks about, a Catholic Pope, this guy's talking about climate change in an actual encyclical. So Trump right up against the Vatican II gang as well.
Let's see, the Catholics. Those are the ones whose holy book says the earth is flat, rests on pillars, and does not move. So I'm really not going to pay much attention to what the Catholic Church has to say about science. It only took them 400 years to apologize for slapping Galileo around.
All right, well, I just want to throw that out there. Thanks, Mike.
All right, well, yes, we're going to just throw it on out there. Thank you for the phone call. Mo in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I just couldn't help but I caught a few sound bites on the news with the Ku Klux Klan thing, and all I could think of was Shakespeare's, Hamlet, whatever, where he says, "Methinks you, lady, you protest too much," and it is so obvious they're going nuts. But I guess I was kind of wondered if she would have said something about Senator Byrd, the wonderful Democrat who was the grand cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan. And he's a wonderful Democrat. They don't say nothing about him. It just makes you, I think, people are just sick of this stuff. They really are.
Well, we've reached the point of absurdity where, it's actually funny, and we're getting a good laugh out of this stuff here. And don't forget, when they were trying to make a big stink about the Confederate flag, and we went back and we found all these political campaign buttons for the Clintons that featured the Confederate flag when they were campaigning down there in the South, and it's reached a point of utter silliness. And it's only March as of tomorrow. We got till November for this free sideshow.
Very insulting to their voters. Very insulting for the voters. Thanks for taking my call, Michael.
All right, thank you very much. And yeah, you should be feeling insulted. They're treating you like you are all a bunch of clueless morons who just believe whatever they're going to tell you to believe. Those days are gone forever. The corporate media and the government blew their credibility with this nonsense about Saddam's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas and the Lusitania wasn't carrying weapons, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Pearl Harbor was a surprise, trust me, and human-caused global warming. Now, there is one aspect of the current campaign which is not to be made fun of, and that is the sheer volume of liberals and even some conservatives who are out there saying, you know, might not be such a bad thing if Donald Trump was assassinated. And it is very alarming that we're seeing all this. From Esquire magazine, a couple of editorials, Man in the Street interviews. Now, there's an article over in From the Trenches World Report saying to the elites, forget about assassinating Donald Trump. We're all expecting you to do that. And whatever cover story you concoct about how Lee Harvey Oswald rose from the grave because he was really a zombie and came back to kill Donald Trump, and he had the help of Sirhan, who finally got his memory back, and blah, 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 blah. We're expecting you to do that. Do you think you're going to get away with it? Obviously, you know that you cannot just kill candidates and get away with it, or there wouldn't have been a cover-up of the John F. Kennedy assassination, the Robert Kennedy assassination, the Martin Luther King assassination, Vince Foster's murder. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Hillary, are you paying attention? That one's coming back to haunt you. But they're almost telegraphing that they're getting ready to do that. Maybe it's a trial balloon. They're trying to go on out there and say, well, if we were to kill Trump, are they going to revolt, or will they just sit and take it one more time? No, we won't. We're not going to take it one more time. We watched how you railroaded our candidate, Ron Paul, out of the race in 2008 and 2012. We're not going to sit still for it again. Your Ron Paul tactics are not working. And now you're talking openly about killing Donald Trump. We're expecting you to do exactly that. And I hope Donald Trump's security is working, because he's already past the point of being able to evade a brokered convention. Donald Trump has more support than all of his other rivals combined, according to the latest polls. That means there will be no brokered convention. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And as I mentioned before, right now, Donald Trump has more support in the polls than all of his Republican rivals combined. The CNN ORC poll has Donald Trump at 49 points, Marco Rubio on 16%, Ted Cruz on 15%, Carson 10%, and John Kasich on 6%. The rest are undecided. Trump has a huge lead up in Massachusetts, 46%. Senator Jeff Sessions has now come out and endorsed Donald Trump. That's his first senatorial endorsement. And what makes it significant, Sessions has never endorsed a presidential candidate in 20 years of being in the Senate. Another little poll being conducted up in New York, Patriot Rising. They're starting to think about eventual matchup. And they're saying basically Hillary could lose to Donald Trump in New York, even though it's a Democratic stronghold. They're asking New Yorkers, if it comes down to Trump, Clinton, which it's looking like, barring the unfortunate unforeseen, Hillary's going to lose, because they remember what a bang-up job she did as a senator. I'll tell you how desperate they are getting over at the GOP. They're talking about drafting Mitt Romney to step into the race. I mean, the primaries and caucuses have already started. And remember, this is the guy who lost before. But they're so desperate they're going to get Mitt Romney in there, and we're going to throw him in there, and we're going to try and get to a brokered convention where we can take it away from Donald Trump and give it to Mitt Romney, because we know Mitt Romney will do what the bankers tell him to do. Mitt Romney will do what the military-industrial complex tells him to do. Mitt Romney will do what Israel tells him to do. Mitt Romney will ignore the will of the people, because that's why we have people like Mitt Romney in politics, to ignore the will of the people. Now, obviously, tomorrow is Super Tuesday, and the situation is going to change dramatically. In fact, most of the observers are saying by the time the counting or cheating is done tomorrow night, the GOP field will be down to only two. Most likely Donald Trump and Marco Rubio. We're going to take a phone call here from Robert in Louisiana. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Michael? My name is Rob. I'm calling from Shreveport.
Yes.
I'm basically, I wanted to ask you a question. You know, I live here again in the South, and after watching the so-called caucus in South Carolina recently, I'm perplexed at how so many black people are unaware of Hillary and Hillary Clinton's background as it relates to our people, and how under her and her husband, basically her administration, but under Bill Clinton, the mass incarceration of black people started. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit of that in detail, because I will be, promoting this episode to, as I do all your episodes, to a lot of who follow me on social media. And also, I just wanted to ask your take on what I call a hoax or a scam, the Black Lives Matter movement. Whereas, how could it be that you can get out here and, protest for Apple or whatever in Chicago when you had almost 95 people, black people murdered by other black people in the state of Chicago? What's your take on it? Because I'm doing a lot of research on this, and I'm finding that it's really nothing more than a George Soros front for the gay and lesbian agenda to be promoted. Basically, the movement has been corrupted. If you can you answer those two questions for me?
Well, yeah, first of all, I don't think the people of South Carolina legitimately voted for Hillary Clinton, because I don't think the people of South Carolina are actually clueless enough to vote for a candidate under multiple federal investigations, including potentially espionage. We already know Hillary's people were cheating. They were caught doing it on video in Iowa and New Hampshire. I don't think the people of South Carolina are dumb enough to vote for Hillary Clinton. I don't think the people of South Carolina of any color are going to vote for Hillary based on her track record. And again, go on out to all these articles that are trying to puff up Hillary Clinton and read the comments on those articles that are still allowing comments, because they're starting to shut those down now.
I noticed that.
Yeah, there's so much venom being directed against Hillary Clinton in these comment sections, you cannot reconcile that with the claimed ascendancy of her numbers. And at this point, yeah, they're giving Hillary the Democratic nomination. They're using the superdelegates to do it. Bernie Sanders, whatever his price is to not kick up a fuss, has been met. Remember the first debate? And he gets out there and says, I'm sick and tired of hearing about the email scandal. That was the issue that it could have put him in the nomination. He wouldn't touch it. So, yes, he's been bought, paid for, he is owned right now. The entire Democratic primary caucus is a theater presentation to make you think that Hillary Clinton is a legitimate candidate selected by the people, and it's an absolute fraud. Now, as far as Black Lives Matter, all the way back when this started getting fanned, all the way back to Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, I said, the government wants to stir up racial trouble, to divide us against each other, and to give the candidates something to talk about this election season that isn't the economy, and isn't the wars, and isn't Hillary spying. And that's exactly what it was for. And if you go back to the history of COINTELPRO in the 1960s, you will see they were doing it back then. In order to prevent the American people from uniting in opposition to the war in Vietnam, the FBI went out and intentionally committed actions to try and fan up racial tension between blacks and whites. The Black Panther coloring book would be a good example of that. And all of this came out in the 1970s when a whistleblower came out and said, you know, all that upset and civil discord in the 1960s, it wasn't grassroots. The government stirred it up to turn us against each other. And Black Lives Matter is just more of the same thing, trying to turn us against each other so we do not unite as a single American people of all colors behind a new President Trump and march into Washington, D.C. and tell the rest of those politicians, you're fired.
Exactly. But see, what I try to do, like I say, I follow you every day, and I try to, I learn a lot from you. You know, like I say, when I grow up, I want to be just like you, Mike. But
no, you don't. No, you don't. Trust me. Trust me.
I try to tell people that what you're witnessing is basically a precursor to a racial war, and if you can't see what's going on, you know, you got to be blind in one eye and can't see out the other. Classic example, what happened in California with the KKK rally.
Yes.
You know, you can see the racial tension being pushed up, and you know, it's just mind-boggling. I want to do the numbers, Michael. Find out just in this first 65 days of this year alone, how many black-on-black murders have there been in just Chicago, New York, Baltimore?
Oh, there's been a lot. There's been a lot here. I have another question to ask, okay? How many of these KKK people in the robes are actually, working for some political campaign? Because we know that one in Nevada was an absolute fake. The guy was out there holding up his Trump sign wearing his KKK robes, and he was black himself. It's all theater.
Yeah.
It's all theater.
So now you see that they're actually trying to portray Trump as a member of the KKK. So what I try to do is I try to raise the consciousness of my people, but I find the information that you give me quite very resourceful and helpful in that information. And I'm just, go ahead and let you finish the show and continue to listen. But I thank you for your input, because, again, I will be sharing this. And maybe one day offline I could talk to you about, working something out where I can promote your show on my show.
Oh, you got your own show. Send me the information. Send me your website for your show, okay? I'll give you a link.
Okay, yeah, all right, do that for me.
All right,
I'm your friend on Google, so we can work that out. But again, you're my hero, Mike. Keep doing it for me.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the kind words. We got to let you go because we're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come on back, the eligibility issue for Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio is still up in the air. The lawsuit set for 11 a.m. this coming Friday in Florida. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And during the break, I went out and I hunted down, and yes, it's all over the corporate media. Back in 1927, Fred Trump, the father of Donald Trump, was arrested during a KKK riot during Memorial Day. And doesn't actually say that he was part of the KKK, only that he was arrested. And let's see. Basically Klansmen marched through the Jamaica neighborhood, spurring an all-out brawl, but it doesn't say which side of the brawl Fred Trump was actually on. But here's the point. This all happened in 1927. Donald Trump was born in 1946, 19 years later. And to try and tarnish Donald Trump for something that happened 19 years before he was even born is a new low, even for the Washington Post. But that's how scared they are of this guy. I get all this emails, well, how can you like Donald Trump because you have his view on this and his I don't care about all that. I'll tell you why I like Donald Trump. Because the New York Times does not like Donald Trump. Because Fox News doesn't like Donald Trump. Because ABC doesn't like Trump. Because NBC doesn't like him. Because J.P. Morgan Chase doesn't like him. Goldman Sachs doesn't like him. Washington Post doesn't like him. The leadership of the Republican Party doesn't like Trump. The leadership of the Democratic Party doesn't like Trump. The state of Israel doesn't like Trump. And those are all the reasons I need to be supporting Donald Trump. The rest is just noise. This literally is a war declared by the political establishment on you, the American people, over who is going to set the future course of this nation. And if you go back and you read that Constitution, you will realize that we, the people, are in the right deciding for ourselves who our leadership will be, and the political elites and Wall Street and the corporate media are in the wrong. So you better decide if you've got the spinal fortitude to take command of the future of this nation, along with 300 million of your fellow Americans. And for those of you who are in the Super Tuesday states, please volunteer to be poll watchers. Because we know this election is going to set records, all-time records for fraud, crookedness, rigging. They're not just stealing the election, they're trying to steal your country. This may be the last chance we have to prevent that theft. Okay, now then, getting on back to Cruz and Rubio. Apparently there is the first of many lawsuits regarding the eligibility of Rubio and Cruz is set for Florida. this Friday at 11 a.m. Florida time. Now, with the case of Cruz, there is absolutely no question. He's ineligible to be President of the United States of America under the Constitution. Under the 12th Amendment, he's ineligible to be Vice President. Cannot happen. Rubio, it's a little murkier because he was born in the country, but both of his parents were Cuban citizens at the time. And I don't think the Founding Fathers were comfortable with the idea of, for example, say in the 1950s, two people emigrate from the Soviet Union, they pop out a child on U.S. soil, and that child eventually can become President of the United States of America. And going back and reading the Law of Nations, it does say in there, to be a natural-born U.S. citizen, it is not just being born in this country, your parents have to be American citizens. And yes, I've gotten emails about all the presidents who didn't meet that exact definition, but then we know our government likes to cheat. Doesn't mean we have to go along with it. In fact, I got an email from this very irate liberal female saying, well, how can you hold, Cruz and Rubio when this president did it, and that president did it, and that president did it? Okay, and that's, we all know that there's a lot of rape going on in this country. Does that mean we have to ignore it when we catch them doing it again? No, we throw them in jail. Did not hear back from her, I might add. So they're going to be looking at that one. Now, here's an interesting article. This came out of Investment Watch blog. There is a story floating around that Ted Cruz is offering to voluntarily withdraw from the race for the White House in exchange for a guaranteed Supreme Court appointment, which he is eligible to serve under the Constitution. Now, Ben Carson over in Irving is saying that he has been offered a bribe to drop out of the campaign. I think he's just trying to get some free headlines. But Ben, looking at your numbers, if somebody has offered you money to drop out, make the smart financial decision. Now, here's where things are starting to get really, really interesting. Not too long ago, in fact, just about a month ago, the New York Times was fully on board with Hillary Rodham Clinton. And they were out there saying Democratic primary voters have the chance to nominate one of the most broadly and deeply qualified presidential candidates in modern history. That article drew 5,700 comments, overwhelmingly negative, saying, are you on drugs over there at the New York Times? And the track record of the Times has been always support the Clintons, despite the allegations of corruption, murder, selling of U.S. secrets to China. The New York Times has always been there backing them because they are the establishment. Now, all of a sudden, the New York Times is having second thoughts. And they're kind of stepping back and saying, well, there isn't any popular support there. Are we risking the credibility of our democratic system trying to shove a particular candidate down the voters' throats? Yeah, you are, as a matter of fact. Now then, here is an interesting little development because there was another New York Times article trying to put a positive face on Barack Obama's and Hillary Clinton's illegal Libyan war. And what the New York Times has now confirmed is what we have been telling you for months. Weapons were being taken from Libya and smuggled into Syria to give to ISIS and Al-Qaeda through the port of Benghazi. The operation was run out of the Benghazi consulate. And that's why when it was attacked, it was allowed to be burned to the ground to get rid of the paper trail. The smuggled weapons, which you all paid for, by the way, included Humvees, counter-battery radar, tow missiles. It was lethal assistance being given by the United States government, by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, to ISIS and Al-Qaeda at a time when we were all being told ISIS and Al-Qaeda are our enemies in the declared war on terror. Now, giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war is treason. That is the definition. And things are getting worse. There's another huge dump of emails that are being released today, compliance with the court order handed down by the judge. It's going to be a huge chunk. Going to take a while to go through them. And every time there's another one of these email dumps, there's more damning information that comes out. The last batch found out that there were contents in these emails that had been cut and pasted from classified documents and put into unclassified documents on Hillary's insecure server. That's coming up. More and more insiders are thinking that Hillary cannot make it to November before some of this stuff starts to break loose. Story coming out of Salon, no less, saying that Hillary is not the best Democratic option for the general election because she's not going to be able to keep the cover-up together until November, when you've got so many people out there that the Clintons have burned over the years, and I'm one of them, and we are dedicated to getting the truth about the Clintons out there to the general public between now and November. All right, we're going to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials. We'll be right back with hour number 2. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to step back to this thing where they're trying to smear Donald Trump on the basis that his father was arrested during a KKK rally 19 years before Donald Trump was born. I'm looking at the original news report of what happened. And it says that Fred Trump was arrested, then released. He wasn't even charged. And nowhere in there does it say that he was part of the KKK. I mean, that's how absurd this is getting right now. And it betrays just how terrified they are of Donald Trump. And you know something? I think most Americans understand. They have a sense of fair play. When they see things like this, they're going to stand up and say, this is a wrong. Donald Trump is being wronged intentionally. They're trying to imply his father was a Klansman. That's not what the news article says. It just said that there was a riot broke out between police and Klansmen. Bystanders got involved. 7 people were arrested. The only thing we can take away from this is that Fred Trump knows how to throw a punch. That's about it. And it happened 19 years before Donald Trump was born. Now, if you are like me, you probably realize that somewhere in your youth, there are some things you may have done that you don't agree with today. We change our opinions over time. Especially when you get married. That tends to mellow people out a lot. All right, let's get on back here to what's going on with Hillary, because there's a very interesting story that's coming out of WorldNet Daily. There is another confirmation that has surfaced regarding a second gunshot wound on Vincent Foster. And apparently, this is information that has surfaced in 2 documents that have recently resurfaced. The 2-page letter of resignation by Kenneth Starr's lead prosecutor, Miguel Rodriguez, and a 31-page memo. Now, for those who are long-term students of the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, Miguel Rodriguez documents there were photographs taken of Vincent Foster's body, clearly showing a wound on his neck. A wound that does not exist in the official story that was put out by Kenneth Starr. Now, when a Freedom of Information Act was filed for those photos, the official story was the photos were unusable. They were poorly exposed. They were just tossed. According to Miguel Rodriguez, that is not true. The negatives were fine. They were printed up. Then they subsequently disappeared. The known acknowledged photos of Foster's body were the subject of a lawsuit that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court by attorney Alan Favish, who at one point worked for Judicial Watch. There's that name again. Keep an eye on those people. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, And the Supreme Court determined that the right to privacy for a dead guy trumps the public's right to know if the White House Deputy Counsel, who at that point was the highest-ranking government official to die in office under suspicious circumstances since Kennedy. You don't need to know that. Just take our word for it. It's a suicide. And there are so many problems with that. I just went back and forth with one of the corporate media people out there saying, oh, there's people thinking Foster, what a bunch of wacko tinfoil hat kooks. And I said, okay, just answer me a couple of questions. There isn't a drop of blood anywhere on Vince Foster's hand or sleeve. That was what first attracted my attention when I saw the picture. I wasn't looking to find that there was a murder there, but they put it up on TV, and my business, at least back then, was motion picture TV visual effects. It's my job to know what makes something look real or not, and the instant that picture went up, my little inner voice was screaming, fake, high school level work being done here. Second, the gun found with Vince Foster's body had been wiped clean of fingerprints, and I think we can all pretty much agree Vince Foster didn't wipe that gun after it was used. Third, the gun found with the body was dark blued steel. The only gun that Vince Foster himself owned was a nickel-plated revolver he inherited from his father, described by the FBI agents as silver-colored when interviewing Lisa Foster, Vince Foster's widow. And in the FD-302, it says the FBI showed Lisa Foster a silver-colored gun. She identified it as the silver-colored gun that Vince Foster had inherited from his father. And Robert Fisk took that FBI statement, took out the phrase silver-colored, and said Lisa Foster identified the gun found with the body. It's obvious they're not the same gun. And this reporter wrote back and said, I'm tired of dealing with you fools. Rudeness being the admission that one does not actually have an argument to make. And that's what these questions. That's how they always respond to these questions. We asked the BBC, how were you able to report on the collapse of Building 7 23 minutes before it happened? Oh, you're a bunch of kooks. We threw away the videotape. Go away. It's a repeating pattern. Now, this isn't the only documentation we have about the neck wound. One of the pieces of autopsy paperwork on the front, you can see where it's been whited out, where it says mouth to neck. Neck is whited out, and then they write in top of head. Now, legally, you're not allowed to use whiteout on an official autopsy or, for that matter, any medical document. You are supposed to do a single strikeout through the error, put the correction, and then initial the correction. On the back of this document, they missed a second description of the neck wound. Goes on and on and on. Story coming out of Russia today. Barack Obama is ordering black leaders in America to endorse Hillary Clinton. Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. The party has chosen the Clinton. You tell your people to support the party favorite. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a quick little phone call. Ralph in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Ralph, are you there? Ralph, are you there? Oh, Ralph. Okay, I'm going to put Ralph back on hold. Guess he went away here. Now, as you know, Bernie Sanders is very upset over the fact that the Democratic superdelegates have all been pledged to Hillary Clinton. There are going to be 715 superdelegates at the Democratic convention. And these people are not voted by the primaries and the caucuses. They are simply appointed by the party leadership to bypass the will of the voters. Now, there is a little bit of a wrinkle, though, because the superdelegates represent the Democratic Party. And if they lose the White House, let alone the Congress, to the GOP this November, their own personal power and prestige in their home states is going to be diminished. So along with this extortion to support Hillary Clinton that came down from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, these superdelegates are going to be thinking, if Hillary can't actually do it, and we have a GOP White House for the next 4 years, our own personal fortunes are on the wane. And if it becomes, by the time of the convention this summer, it becomes obvious Hillary is not going to survive to November because of all these scandals, the superdelegates might just desert her and go back to Bernie Sanders. And that's why he's sticking into this thing. All right, we're coming up on a commercial break here. We are hearing rumors that Kasich may be getting ready to drop on out of the race. We'll be back after these words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just got an email from somebody who says there's a new breaking development on the Donald Trump campaign. It is now being reported that his birth certificate has been faked, and Donald Trump's real father is Darth Vader. They are getting desperate, aren't they? All right, let's turn to the war zones. Emphasis on the plural. We are hearing reports from shelling and airstrikes in northern Syria. The ceasefire is already broken. Dead on arrival here. Russian defense official reports 7 ceasefire violations in Syria coming from the Turkish side of the border. Now, this story coming on up from over at Prison Planet. Saudi and Turkish terror groups in Syria refuse to respect the ceasefire. It's just an opportunity for the U.S. to play that they're being peacemakers and everybody gets a chance to reload. Another story coming out of the Express in Great Britain. Saudis and Turks are preparing an air, sea, and land war against Bashar al-Assad. I wonder what's going to happen when they run into the Russian forces, as they're going to. Now, there's another article coming out of Global Research up in Canada, and it's talking about comments made by the Russian Deputy Defense Minister Anatoly Antonov, basically giving a briefing on the details of how ISIS is being funded in Syria, Turkey's role in supporting the terrorists, including the smuggling and selling of stolen Syrian oil by Turkey. Now, having been caught red-handed in all these violations, Turkey's decided to go with the attitude of, well, we're going to make it look like it's intentional, and we wanted you to know. So according to their Prime Minister Davutoglu, Turkey is going to keep supporting the terrorists fighting Assad. Because, hey, after almost 5 years of messing it up this bad, we're just going to go on doing exactly the same thing and pray for a different outcome. The U.S. government is going to sell $680 million worth of bunker buster bombs to Turkey, knowing full well they're going to be delivered to ISIS. That's a lot of bunker busters. The Iraq army has retaken a major part of Ramadi from the ISIS forces, despite interference coming from the United States. And here's a very interesting article came out of RINF.com, how a little pink flower defeated the world's sole superpower. And they're talking about the absolute disaster that Afghanistan has turned into. Right now, Afghanistan is the longest war in U.S. history. We've been in there for 15 years. 2,200 Americans have died there. More than $1 billion spent. And it was all done to get an oil pipeline right of way and cheap opium for American drug lords. That's why they're going to stay there. Guarantee the flow of opium to those drug lords. Now, there's a very alarming article in Press TV where Arsen Avakov, over in Crimea, he's the current premier. He's saying plans are underway in Ukraine to regain Crimea. We're working on a project that will prepare us to regain Crimea. Now, you need to remember, Crimea declared independence from Ukraine on March 17th, 2014, held a referendum for independence, and then held a referendum to merge with the Russian republics, at which 96.8% of the voters voted in favor of secession and then merging with the Russian Republic. Of course, over in Kiev, they're saying, well, the Americans have taught us that what the people want doesn't really matter. So we're going to do what we're being told to do, and what the Ukrainian people and Crimean people want, it just doesn't matter anymore. You don't understand the New World Order. You've got nothing to say about it. Why can't you just accept that? What's wrong with you people? You think there should be democracy and freedom and independence. Oh, that's so last century. Now, NATO Supreme Commander Philip Breedlove is out there saying that Russia poses an existential threat to the U.S. and the Western world. Not just a threat, an existential threat, meaning Russia is coming to completely wipe us off the face of the earth. The fact that this kind of scaremongering is showing up at the same time Congress is debating the military's budget is, of course, purely coincidental here. But a U.S.-based think tank, the Atlantic Council, is basically saying right now that NATO actually can't fight in a war against Russia. Despite all the recent rebuilding and surging, they just don't have the muscle to do it against Russia's modern military. In other words, they're saying that the war against Russia will be a war between Russia and the United States. And the Europeans are just going to stand off to one side and watch their land, their buildings, their heritage get flattened, like they saw in Big Mistake number 1 and Big Mistake number 2. Now, as you heard on the top news break, Iran is having their elections, and the reformists have swept to power. The moderates have won the majority. That's going to be good news for those of us who want peace, and of course terrible news for those who want war, because they wanted those hardliners in there screaming death to America, or saying something that could be mistranslated as death to America, and they didn't get it. By the way, remember that wonderful synagogue in Tehran? It's one of the oldest continual operating synagogues in the Middle East. They were doubling it as a polling station, and there was a high voter turnout among Iran's Jewish population. Not quite lining up with all this rhetoric you've been hearing about how Iran wants to wipe Jews off the face of the earth. They want to bring back the Holocaust. The Jews living in Iran are very comfortable there. If Iran was really about persecuting the Jews, they would start with the ones inside their own border. Israel tried to offer financial inducements, let's call it what it is, bribes, to move from Iran to Israel. And the Iranian Jews said, no, we like it here. Huge embarrassment. All right, let's see. We're coming up on a commercial break. Before we reach the commercial, though, getting over to Great Britain, we're coming up on the referendum for the Brexit, and apparently the government of David Cameron and the BBC are just mounting a massive fear campaign. Same thing that we're seeing our media do about Donald Trump. They want to hold the European Union together, all hail Brussels and so forth. And they're really kind of striking out. More about this when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call here from Scott in Texas. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Scott? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, greetings from Garland, Texas, where we're just now coming out with our new bumper stickers that look like a hunting permit that says Aiea, open all season. So thought that'd be a little humor for everybody.
Okay.
But basically what this is coming down to with Trump is this is just the people are just having a referendum on the whole system. And the more that they attack him, the more people are looking at it and go, yeah, guess what? We thought you were liars. We know you're liars. And now everybody that jumps on the bandwagon just makes you want to go, oh, yeah, I thought you was a scumbag. Now you proved it right. So
yes.
Great. Thanks a lot.
No, you're absolutely right. This has gone way beyond Donald Trump himself. This is the American people standing up and saying we are sick and tired of politics as usual, business as usual, corporate media lying as usual. We want a complete change. It's our last chance for a peaceful revolution. You'd better let us have it. Because remember what John Kennedy said about peaceful revolution.
Right.
Okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I was just going to say, I totally agree. And, for us here in Texas, we take it to people, and, you know, I know your approach is kind of be a little bit soft about it, but I smack people upside the head with reality and truth. And if once they get good and mad, I tell them to go Google it and prove me wrong. And you know what? I have more people looking at it coming back and say, you know what? You were right. And they hate to admit it, but hey, that's how we do it around here. Y'all have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now then, we're talking about the Brexit. And again, the battle lines are being drawn. George Galloway ripped into BBC because apparently BBC asked him to come into the studio to discuss the European Union. And then once they had him there on camera, they launched an ambush attack, you know, trying to say, you defend your position on the Brexit. And Galloway, as is his normal style, ripped into BBC saying this is childish. And it's very obvious that your coverage of the EU referendum is hopelessly biased. And of course, if I'd been there, I would have said, by the way, just how is it that you were able to predict the collapse of Building 7 23 minutes before it happened? And why weren't you able to figure out what Jimmy Savile was doing to all those little kiddies all these years along? So it's time for BBC to also get its dose of humble, which, by the way, apparently they're going to get with the new Top Gear. Because they're already changing the presenters. They're bringing new presenters on here. And, you know, I mean, I like the show. And I am hoping that the original presenters in their new program, I think it's called Gearhead, and I'm hoping they're going to do well. Because I did enjoy that show. Boris Johnson, Mayor of London, is accusing David Cameron of running a fear campaign regarding leaving the European Union, literally carrying out a campaign of terror against the people of Great Britain. And Boris Johnson is criticizing George Osborne for basically trying to sell the fear that if the Great Britain leaves the European Union, it will destroy the British economy. Actually, no, the reverse is going to happen, because if you go out and talk to the grassroots in Great Britain, one of the reasons they want a Brexit is they are tired of being soaked for high taxes for Brussels, and the money flows out of their pockets and it flows into Brussels and nothing comes back except more rules and laws. Now, here in the United States, Comcast has issued an order to MSNBC to ban all hosts from the air who are not supporting the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Has it ever been more fully on display that corporate media is there to sell you an agenda, not to report honestly and objectively what's going on? Whether it's the BBC and the Brexit, or MSNBC and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, they're propaganda organs. They're there to sell you the next war, the next tax, the next agenda. And that's why people are turning away from the corporate media. Now, there's a very serious article that came out of Sputnik News. Will the European Union share the fate of the Soviet Union? Now, I've been talking about for some time how I see the federal government in Washington, D.C. collapsing much as the way Moscow did in the days of the Soviet Union. This article is applying that same set of parallels to what's going on in the European Union, where the EU politicians, the people in Brussels, the European Central Bank are looking for ways to save the Eurozone project. But they're dealing with the fact that the private central bank has gutted the European economy. All of these member states of the European Union are in serious imposed debt problems by Brussels. Growing public distrust of the motives of Brussels and its supporters in these various satellite states, and of course, the stresses and strains from this out-of-control refugee situation. And more people are thinking that setting aside the issue of the Brexit, the EU itself may be about to come apart. And there was a very good article over in the Express in Great Britain where they went out and they literally drew a demographic map of the European Union showing the degree of anti-EU feeling all across the continent. And it's definitely there. Brussels is all in favor of the European Union. The capital cities are all in favor of the European Union because they're all getting rich off of it. But the people of Europe do not like it. They're sick and tired of it. They want to go back to what they had before. They want to pull themselves out of the way of this coming train wreck of a third world war. Now, over in Nazi land, as you know, not too long ago, Israel's running out of real Nazis. They're running out of Holocaust survivors to wag at us and say, you got to give us money. We suffered so much. Look at what the Nazis did. That's why you can't complain when we go and bomb the Palestinians, even though the Palestinians had nothing to do with what the Nazis were doing. So one of the most ridiculous situations was they grabbed this guy who'd worked as a medic at Auschwitz. Had nothing to do with guarding the prisoners, had nothing to do with whatever we're being told was being done to the prisoners. He was a medic. He was there to hand out medicines and put Band-Aids. But he was at Auschwitz. We've got another one we can wag at the world. And so they basically charged him with 3,681 counts of accessory to murder because he handed out Band-Aids. How dare he? And the guy's 95 years old. And it was like, is there any real point to this other than Israel's propaganda? And as it turns out, apparently there isn't, because this 95-year-old gentleman has now been declared too ill by his doctors to show up to court. The case is going to collapse. The guy's on the verge of death. No, revive him. We've got to hang him. And here's how absurd this whole situation with Israel is getting. This is a story coming out of New York's Mount Sinai Hospital, where they claim to have conducted a scientific study showing that the cellular memory of the trauma of the Nazis has been passed on to the children of the Holocaust survivors. See, Israel's running out of real Nazis and real Holocaust survivors, so now they need an excuse to demand more money from you, from you who never did anything, to give to people to whom nothing was actually done. But as long as it works and they get the money, hey, that's all that counts. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let's talk about the economy a little bit. The G20 finance leaders have concluded their meeting without agreeing to a global stimulus push. It's one of the reasons why the markets are down all across the globe today. Basically, they were all together in Shanghai and said, we're not going to do any more stimulus, which actually was a smart thing to do. Stimulus does not actually work to improve an economy. It just makes the financial sector richer at the expense of the poor, because when they create all this new instant money and they pour it all over the bankers, it reduces the value of the money that is in your pocket. If they wanted to really get the economy going, they would be pouring that money all over us so we could pay our bills, so we could buy new cars and new products. Making the banks richer does not make the economy work. Making the people richer is how you revive the economy. Henry Ford understood this. And the way he ran his businesses, and one of the reasons he was denounced as an anti-Semite, was he held to the principle that the best way to become prosperous is to make your community prosper around you. And it worked. That's what made Ford one of the major players in automobile manufacturing. But that kind of bring everybody up together doesn't sit well with the fascists. We're supposed to be rich. You're all supposed to be poor and scrabble for the few crumbs we fling your way and then borrow more money from us to buy the things you need. That's fascism. So the G20 actually did something that I agree with here. Argentina has finally managed to reach an accord with Paul Singer's Elliott Management. Now, Elliott Management sued Argentina back in 2001 over a $95 billion default. And as part of the lawsuit, was able to get a hold placed on Argentina so they couldn't pay any of their other creditors. That's the reason Argentina is in such a mess. Now, Elliott Management is okay, the injunction's been lifted. Argentina can start working its way out of this debt problem. Fitch has cut Azerbaijan's credit rating to junk, another victim of this ill-considered oil price war. Russia and India have reached an agreement to trade across their border in their own domestic national currencies. They don't need no stinking dollars. Thank you very much. Now, we've been talking about the debt burden here in the United States of America and how bad it is, hopelessly out of control. For the government, for the student loans, for mortgages, credit card debt. And there's an article from USA Today saying that experts have gone out studying Americans and realizing that when they fill out a survey on what their credit card debt is, out of sheer embarrassment, they tend to underreport it. And the true scale of Americans' credit card debt may actually be close to $500 billion higher than had originally been reported. It's a bad, bad sign. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog, deliverable silver stocks. Let me back up here, rented lips. Deliverable silver stocks at the COMEX have reached an historic low. Huge demand for the physical metal. Nobody wants the paper. And yet somehow the prices are still being kept down. Kind of an interesting thing there. All right, let's talk a little bit about computers. As you're probably aware, there's been a huge scandal over at the Internal Revenue Service regarding a data breach involving their Get Transcript program, which allows you to go in and check your tax history online. The program was started 2 years ago so that you could request your tax history over the Internet, but apparently it was discovered hackers got into this system, and more than 700,000 Social Security numbers and tax returns have now been stolen by identity thieves who are using all of this information to set up credit lines, borrow money, new credit cards, all on your name. 700,000 taxpayers have had their information compromised, including those Social Security numbers. So here is the conflict that we are all in right now. The FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the police departments want complete access to all of our private data on our electronic devices. They want to ban encryption under the fraudulent claim that this will stop crime and terror. Yet the information they already have on us is apparently wide open to the criminals. And then they wonder why we want them to start minding their own business and comply with the Fourth Amendment. Because again, we proved banning encryption only ends privacy for law-abiding citizens. Real criminals and terrorists are going to have their own systems of encryption. The fact that the NSA and the FBI can't find any of these people, these ransomware authors, proves that. You can have my Captain Midnight secret decoder badge. You pry it from my cold, dead fingers. A little bit of an antique. That thing's actually older than I am, and that's getting pretty old. Now, there's an article over here in PatriotRising.com talking about Apple's position, saying that they shouldn't undermine global security because the FBI can't or won't do their job. And that's exactly what it comes down to. This situation with the Internal Revenue Service proves it. We cannot trust this government to safeguard our data or treat it with respect. Why should we be okay with them just being able to help themselves to anything on our electronic devices? And the answer is we shouldn't. That's why we have a Fourth Amendment. The government is supposed to mind their own business. It's amazing. Corporate media is still up in arms over the issue of piracy, and they want stronger copyright protections and more software on your computer to guard their digital property rights, most of which has become such a pain to use that we've quit. I did. When I built this machine, I got Blu-ray drives, And I have a lot of Blu-ray discs, which I bought at the store. These are legally owned Blu-ray movie discs. They will not play on this system because apparently the monitors do not have this special chip in there that tells the computer, I'm just a monitor and I'm not making an illegal copy of your Blu-ray. So I called the computer store and said, what do I do? Well, you got to buy the upgraded monitors with the chip and everything. No, actually, I just threw the Blu-rays away. That's what I did. I don't even bother watching this stuff anymore. They've made it too difficult. And let's face it, a lot of what's coming out of Hollywood these days is junk, repetitive, remakes, propaganda. It's very alarming that there's all these war movies on cable TV right now. And here's the irony of it. There's a story that came out of torrentfreak.com. They've been doing some studies about people who are content pirates, and they found out in the long run, they actually spend more money buying music and videos than people who are buying stuff legally do. Going after the pirates, they're actually going after a major part of their revenue stream. They like to do it, though, because every time they come out with another loser movie and the studio's in financial trouble, they don't want to admit that management made a bad choice. Oh, no, the 27th remake of Moby Dick, I mean, how could we go wrong? We got rid of the part about cruelty to animals. We threw some women in there. You know, the officers are racially balanced. You know, why was that such a failure? Well, because the pirates stole our profits. No, actually, most of what's coming out of Hollywood these days isn't worth the trouble to steal. That's really what it comes down to. Okay, we're coming up here on our top of the hour commercial and news break. When we come on back, we got a caller waiting on the line I'm going to get to. Some new developments in the area from GMOs, new developments there. Human cause, global warming, more of your phone calls. And we'll be finishing out this Leap Day Monday as we gird our loins to go into Super Tuesday. Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Super Tuesday. Able to steal elections in a single bound. We'll be back after these few words. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We've got a caller waiting on the line. But before we get there, another little piece of history about the KKK. Okay? Now, remember when they were trying to come out the KKK and the Confederate flag, and we found all these photos of the KKK marching with the stars and stripes proudly. It was a very popular movement. And it wasn't all about racism. It was a nationalistic movement. And here's an interesting one. We all know that during Martin Luther King's career, J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI sent messages to the Ku Klux Klan that attacks on civil rights leaders would not be investigated. And here's one that just came on out here, that just a listener sent in to me. Back during Prohibition, the federal government hired the Ku Klux Klan to enforce Prohibition and arrest people caught with alcohol. So there's a little aspect of, maybe that riot was all about whether people were going to have a beer or not. All right, let's grab a phone call here. Terry in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, just since you're talking about the KKK, I think that possibly Martin Luther King was assassinated by the Memphis police with the aid of the FBI. You have any comments on that?
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, there's no question that the rifle that was planted on James Earl Ray could not have fired the bullet that killed Dr. Martin Luther King, because the bullets from the James Earl Ray rifle had a gouge in it from a manufacturing defect, and the bullets recovered from Dr. King's body did not have that gouge on there. And James Earl Ray was trying to get a new ballistics test and a new trial, and they just kept stalling until James Earl Ray died in prison of an illness he could have been cured of very easily had he been allowed out. At which point the judge said nobody else has standing in this case and basically threw the thing out of court.
Yeah, I never bought the fact that somebody would break out of prison in the morning and commit an assassination the same day in the evening. Isn't that what they said happened?
Well, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, looking back in hindsight, it was such a stupid story. It's amazing that anybody believed it. And maybe they didn't. Maybe that's just, history was written from the newspaper headlines. Oh, yes, James Earl Ray did it. there was never any evidence. Basically, his court-appointed attorney said, you will get a light sentence if you plead guilty. James Earl Ray pled guilty, was sentenced to immediate life, and he said, wait a minute, I'd like to change my plea. And the judge said, too late, we got you. There was no evidence at all. And I actually have an article, if you go to the top of WhatReallyHappened.com, one of the articles we did when we were just getting started goes to that very famous photo that was taken just moments after Dr. King was shot, where everybody on the balcony is pointing to where the gunshot came from. And the headline said, from the rooming house where James Earl Ray was staying. But if you take a wide view from that location, it's obvious they're not pointing at the rooming house. They're pointing at the roof of the building next door.
Yeah. Well, plus he wasn't even on the second floor. He was on the first floor, I think, wasn't he?
Well, no, Dr. King wanted to be on the first floor. He didn't like being up on the second floor. Somebody changed the reservation at the last second. And
I mean, James Earl Ray was on the first floor.
No, I don't think so. I think he was on the second floor. It was kind of hard to say because that building was actually built into a hill slope. So what was ground floor on the street side was, I think, second floor. I'd have to go back and look at the pictures on that one.
Hey, Michael, let me ask you this. This is the reason I called. Theron had his parole hearing last week, and it was denied again.
Yes.
I always had this idea about him and also James Holmes out in Colorado, the theater shooter, that they were probably both under some kind of mind control because they wake up, they don't remember anything.
Well, we had that Uber driver who was perfectly okay, and then all of a sudden he gets a phone call and he just starts acting weird and driving weird and shooting people. We know the CIA has been experimenting with this going all the way back to World War II. We know about their failures, like that bondage dungeon they had in San Francisco for 10 years. But obviously the successes they've had, they're not going to admit to.
Yeah. This is all under, is this MK Ultra or is that something separate? It's all mind control, right?
Well, the MK and MK Ultra came from a Nazi program that stood for mind control. The K is from control. And the CIA simply adopted it, saying we're going to do better than the Nazis, so instead of being MK, this is MK Ultra, and that's where the code name came from. This is back before code names were assigned at random by a computer.
Yeah, and they probably got a little more perfected than they had then.
Well, they've had all these years to work on it since then, and who knows what they're able to do.
Yeah, okay, Mike, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. Now then, do you remember a while back there was a research project done in France where scientists took some rats and they fed them on natural corn, GMO corn, and GMO corn plus Roundup, and natural corn plus Roundup. And in all the cases where there was either GMO or Roundup, starting at 4 months, the rats started suffering major medical problems, massive tumors, reproductive failure, stunted growth, shortened lifespan. And this was a very significant study because they ran the rats out for their entire lifespan, from birth to death. And Monsanto had only done a rat study for 3 months to declare everything was safe. So this study comes out in France. It's denounced by the supporters of GMO. Monsanto actually got one of their former executives on the editorial board of this journal that had published the results, the study, and then got the study retracted. Was never refuted, never contradicted. It was simply, it was retracted. Oh, see, it was retracted. There's no reason for you to look at that. Now, the studies have been repeated in other places around the world, and they're getting the same results. Long-term chronic exposure to GMOs and to glyphosate causes problems. Even the World Health Organization is saying glyphosate is a probable carcinogen. And it took Monsanto millions of dollars of lobbying to avoid being said definite carcinogen. Now, the French professor who led this research term, Gilles-Éric Sarellini, has taken the issue to court, and he's just won yet another court victory. The court in France has indicted Marc Falloux, the former chairman of France's Biomolecular Engineering Commission, for forgery and the use of forgery in trying to discredit this research on glyphosate and GMOs. He'll be sentenced this summer. See, when you have all this money out there, they don't care if what they're selling you is safe or not. So a few of you die. How pity can you get here? All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Tom in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I was watching Alex Jones had interviewed Louis Farrakhan, and Louis Farrakhan had a lot of nice words, just like David Duke, to say about Donald Trump. Talk about joining people together.
Well, we need more of that. We need more of that.
Yeah. And I was thinking, too, that, you know, if Donald Trump, and that's what they'd love him to do, is have to spend all this time negating the beliefs of everybody that might vote for him. You know, that would keep him pretty busy and not sticking to any agenda.
Well, again, none of these candidates can talk about the economy without getting laughed off the podium. They can't talk about the wars without being booed. This whole racism issue and KKK and the rest of it is all manufactured to get you thinking that's what the 2016 election is about. And it isn't. And I think the American people understand that, and that's why they're not buying into all this nonsense.
Well, hopefully not. And that's what I'm saying. That's what they're trying to do, is get them off the agenda and get them on a defensive mode.
Well, they are. They're trying to. Yeah, that's the whole point of going negative, is to force them to be on the defensive. There was a story one time about Lyndon Johnson when he was out there politicking. And he was making accusations against his opponent, and one of his advisors said, look, you cannot go out and say your opponent is having sex with barnyard animals. And Lyndon Johnson said, no, but I can make him have to deny it. And that's how the game gets played. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And already we are getting word from the State Department that 2 of the emails from the batch of Hillary Clinton emails that were supposed to be released today will be withheld. There is no explanation, only the assurance that there is no top secret information in these emails. Why are they then withholding them? Well, we can't tell you that. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, there's something you need to understand about these emails. Okay, we're not talking about somebody's personal, private emails. All government documents are the property of the American people. It's the work product. We're not talking about emails from Hillary to her daughter or to Bill about planning for the wedding. We're talking about emails generated in the course of business of the State Department. If they are not classified, if they don't contain classified information, there is no legal grounds for withholding them in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. Can you say cover up, people? I knew you could. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I'm calling, and I'm not sure because I just tuned in but I read on your website this morning about Michael Hayden, the former head of the NSA and intelligence agency. I think it was DIA actually, and the NSA, saying that the Joint Chiefs and the military might not accept orders from Trump, that they may actually even act against him, and how utterly, completely inappropriate it is for anybody to say that, especially a guy who's still collecting a pension as a 4-star general, and then on top of that, he's saying that, well, because Trump talked about torture, and I disagree with Trump about torturing families too, but this guy, he's been in direct charge of this. Hayden, they've been torturing people and torturing their family members for a decade, and this
we still don't know how bad it was. We still don't know how bad it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those 2,000. Remember the videos that they refused, that they court ordered to give up, and they destroyed before they would release them and whatever. But not only torture, but targeted assassinations and eavesdropping. This guy's the American Himmler, and he's criticizing Trump for what he said when this guy has done all that.
And he's basically inciting to treason, or he's inciting to treason with this comment.
It shows you, Mike, how much they're out to get him. You know
how scared they are of Donald Trump. I'm in agreement. and I don't agree with everything that Trump says, but, I like him because the establishment does not, and unfortunately, I'm very, very concerned that if they can't find a way to cheat him of the nomination and the presidency, that they're just going to shoot him out of office.
They're definitely. All the signals are there. Romney's coming out of retirement to take over if Rubio goes down, and they're coming out to say that that the Army wouldn't or the military wouldn't accept orders from him, and it's just incredible. And all this stuff about David Duke, which has turned out to be crap.
Yes.
But Michael, let me switch one more thing if I can. Over last Friday, Obama signed some legislation that made it illegal to label anything made in the occupied West Bank or Gaza. You're not allowed to label it. So, in other words, it would be impossible to boycott and divest because of that.
Well, actually, that's not true. If you pay attention to that little number on the UPC code, the little bars, part of that number is the place of origin. And that has to be there or the electronic cash registers won't work.
Well, at any rate, he's signing orders with the intention of doing that, at any rate.
Well, I've got a solution for that here, okay? Instead of boycotting whatever's coming out of the West Bank, boycott anything from Israel, period, end of discussion. That's how you get around that.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyways, listen, that's it for me. But it's incredible that they're doing this, and they will indeed Robert Kennedy, this guy. If he, that's it.
This is going to be a year for the history books. Absolutely no question about that. Peter, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the science and health issues. Over at UCLA, Dr. Kenneth P. Stoller is a former pediatrician, and he has resigned and issued a statement saying that the American Academy of Pediatrics knows vaccines cause autism, and they were trying to hide it because vaccines make money, and if your kid is autistic, we'll make more money treating the autism. We can't survive if you're all healthy. We need you to be chronically ill, or we're just going to be out of business. Three executives over at Fukushima are facing jail time. They're finally starting to round these people up, charge them with negligence. They're facing criminal charges. And, well, they should. One of the failings of modern civilization is if you're above a certain rank or a certain degree of wealth or a certain degree of fame, you get a free pass on these things, whether it's O.J. Simpson or bankers at Goldman Sachs. That's not the way the United States is supposed to work. The United States is founded on the principle the laws apply to everybody equally, from the bricklayer working on your house all the way up to the president himself or herself. Nobody is supposed to be too big to jail. Nobody is supposed to be immune. Now, not too long ago, we were talking about how a lot of charities you see advertised on TV are not actually legal nonprofits, 501c3s. And there was this one group called Cancer Fund that was incorporated as a for-profit corporation. They ran a bunch of different charity names with TV advertising for fundraising, and they basically just put the money in their pockets. And they made huge amounts of money. They ran this thing for years. The guy who started it all was James T. Reynolds Sr. And they hid all their wealth with accounting tricks, and finally, after years of federal investigation, they're going to shut the charities down. And it is a reminder that you need to be careful. More when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call from Leroy in Atlanta. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I heard you talking about that vaccine, and I'm sure you probably heard about the doctors that mysteriously died last summer?
Yeah, they were all basically looking into this GC math, and they basically discovered that all of the vaccines being administered to Americans contain this enzyme that prevents the body from utilizing vitamin D as part of the immune response. In other words, these vaccinations are not, in fact, making us well or protecting us from illness. They are destroying our immune system so that we will get sick with things like cancer that are big-ticket medical establishment products. I mean, that's how corrupt our society has become, where they are intentionally making us ill so they can profit making us well again.
So, could you help me out? How do you pronounce it? I know it's spelled Nagalase. Is it Nagalase?
Nagalase.
Nagalase. Okay, so yeah, like you were saying, it's a protein that is intrinsic to everything from influenza to the HIV virus. That basically, from the definition I read, those things aren't possible to be made without this. So, yeah, they definitely out to kill us, and they have a lot of ways to do it.
No. They're not out to kill us. They just need us to be constantly sick so that we will be forced to buy their products.
Well, here in Georgia, we have something, and I'm sure you've heard about it, the Georgia Guidestones.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not talking about making people sick.
They're talking about population reduction, but from the point of view of the pharmaceutical corporations, they want a giant population because the more people there are, the more money they're going to make, and they need these people to be constantly sick. If all of Americans were healthy and disease-free, the entire medical establishment would collapse. They literally, their financial well-being, their ability to go on paying the bankers the interest on all their loans depends on us being continuously sick. Now, many, many years ago, when I still lived with my family in West Covina, California, and long before I was married to either of my spouses, I had a girlfriend who was a unit secretary at Queen of the Valley Hospital. And this was when they got their first CAT scan machine. And while I was waiting for my girlfriend to finish her shift, I was sitting in the nurse's lounge, and on the wall was a letter from hospital management to keep the CAT scan machine booked at all times. Schedule patients for CAT scans. We can't let it sit idle, or we will not be able to make the payments on the machine. So they were literally telling doctors, you will send people in to get CAT scans. Doesn't matter if they need it or not. We need to be able to bill them for it.
No doubt. Well, so long as they are looking for money, they're going to find themselves in a situation where the love of money is the root of all evil, and we know where that puts you.
Well, in many ways, the modern vaccine industry is like the opening of the second Indiana Jones movie, where the Asian gentleman gives Indiana Jones the poison and then offers to sell him the antidote. That's exactly what the medical establishment is doing to us right now.
No doubt. Hey, I'm still looking at that information you have about his birth certificate. One of the most interesting things I saw that you said on there was that this guy has a lot of birth certificates, and with putting that supposed original, into the PDF, it causes it to vectorize, right?
Yes.
So how do we know that that is actually a legitimate copy?
Well, the state of Hawaii certified it as being accurate. Unfortunately, the person who made that certification is no longer with us. But in the end, it really does come down to the fact that in the 1960s, there were a lot of love children. We had the Summer of Love followed by the Autumn of Gonorrhea, and young ladies who had children who found a husband to marry them, child and all. Rather than go through the process of adoption, they would simply request a new birth certificate be issued with the corrected name for the father. And it's not a big deal. It just isn't a big deal at all. And the Washington Post has confirmed that the claim that Obama was born in Kenya was a hoax started by Hillary's 2008 campaign. Now, in this case with Ted...
No, we can't believe them. They lie.
Okay, well, I live here. I know people who know the Obamas, and I verified for myself that Obama was born here. Anyway, listen, going to let you go. Switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Glenn, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, now I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, sometimes things don't always flip in, on your end sometimes, I think.
Well, it's that hamster in the wire wheel. He's getting old and tired, and he's undervolting the mixer board.
Yeah, gotcha. I actually called about David Duke, but something you just said about the children from the summer gloves, winter, fall gunnery, and then the people with children. You just said something about, like, if the woman found a man to marry, but like if the man she married wasn't the actual biological father of the child, shouldn't the child really be adopted? If the child, if the man
technically yes, technically yes, but it just wasn't. It was a way of shortcutting the process. We know that Barack Obama's real biological father is Frank Marshall Davis, and but when Obama's mother married Barack Obama Sr., they just had a new birth certificate issued. That was it, and it was done a lot back then. It's not a big deal. Okay.
Right now about David Duke. I've listened to him, and I'm sure you're aware he has his own program over on Jeff Francis Network.
Yes.
And I've listened to him. I don't know what transpired in the man's youth and stuff, and certainly, like as you say, the idea of holding someone forever in contempt for youthful indiscretion is folly. But also, people don't neglect the fact this man has an earned PhD from a prestigious, Ukrainian university. It's not like some match, like some cheesy, matchbook school or something. It's an esteemed, very old. I have to look into it and actually find out the titles. But the man has an earned PhD. Nobody ever had the decency to refer to him as doctor, and he's certainly very well reasoned. I thought Alex Jones had interviewed him weeks ago or months ago, and a couple months now maybe, and he clearly hadn't researched the man's background. And when he spoke to him, David Duke just patiently and politely just used sound logic and clear explication, and it made Alex look kind of foolish. And obviously he was sort of flustered, and Alex has been slightly biased by him since, and it was his own fault for not doing his homework. But I've never heard David Duke say anything, either outwardly, obviously offensive in terms of his doctrine or his teaching or his stances, or even his emphasis seems quite moderate. He allows for everyone to be proud of who they are. He allows for people to have their own ethnic or cultural, racial identifications.
That's
he allows for races to interrelate. He would be guilty in these days of saying that, like, all lives matter and that it's okay to be white. That's about the worst you can say of the guy at this point.
Yeah, that really is. And again, most young people's image of the KKK is what motion picture and TV have portrayed them as, as constantly harassing blacks. The KKK was a very popular organization, and it had a platform like other political parties, which included supporting the temperance movement, supporting veterans' rights. They had a variety of opinions. It wasn't just all about running around trying to grab black people and hanging them from trees. That's a very thin stereotype generated by the media. Anyway, Glenn, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show today. And despite indications of a possibly early spring, certainly that's what Puxatawny Phil was telling us, the snow is returning to the Midwest, and we're not out of this winter just yet. And remember, back in 2000, Al Gore and his cult of carbonazis were out there saying snowfalls are now a thing of the past. And this is one of the areas where I do agree with Donald Trump. It's a gigantic hoax to trick you out of your money and obedience, to save planet Earth from you icky-poo human beings. Here in Hawaii, we're having a little unusual weather ourselves, and probably some of it's being driven by El Nino. This has been a very active El Nino season, and El Nino is caused by the eruption of undersea volcanoes on the floor of the Pacific near New Zealand. And if you look at the bathymetric maps of the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, there are dozens and dozens of volcanic cones there, and nobody knows how many are erupting at any given time. But that's where that plume of heat is coming from. Now, we're starting to see some major storm activity out there. This last couple of weeks, we had major waves, record-setting waves, really bashing the north shore of our islands, including right here in Oahu. This is an annual event, and, of course, the surfers love it. They're out there on these gigantic waves. And fortunately, Claire and I live up on top of a hill, so it's not a problem for us. But we are starting to hear sort of grumblings and clearing of throat from the Hawaii Volcano Observatory down on the Big Island, because apparently Mauna Loa, which is the southern of the two giant volcanoes that make up the Big Island, is in a state of unrest, is how they're putting it. And they're basically, there's been an increase in the small earthquakes. The cone itself is on what they call an inflation. It's growing from internal pressure, as determined by the GPS system. Now, it doesn't mean there's going to be a big eruption. There have been periods of inflation before where it'll sort of get up there and then it just sort of shrugs and goes on back down. But they're keeping an eye on it. Were it to erupt on the level of some of these other volcanoes we've seen recently, Claire and I will see it from our back porch area. Now, further down on the flank of Mauna Loa, there's been a continuous ongoing eruption in and around Kilauea and the various craters down Chain of Craters roads. That's been going continuously for almost 20 years. But we're starting to see the summit of Mauna Loa have some activity. That will be interesting. Certainly would be good for tourism, I'm sure. Everybody loves to see a volcano. Of course, part of the problem is that the area that is inflating involves what is called the Southern Rift Zone. And if you go in and look at the south flank of Mauna Loa in Google Earth, you will see that there are major cracks running parallel to the coastline. And these are areas where large sections of the island have actually slipped down 4 or 5 feet from past eruptions. And there is a concern, based on the geological history of the Hawaiian Islands. If you look at those ocean floor maps, there have in times past been events where entire sections of the island simply fall off and plop into the ocean, which is terribly inconvenient for all the coastlines along the Pacific. And there has been some concern about that southern rift zone for quite some time. Not expecting anything dramatic to happen anytime soon, but over the long course of geological history, yeah, sooner or later. Massive snowstorm will hit Nova Scotia on March 5th, so we're not out of this winter yet. Finally, the propaganda for the global warming people is still out there. Over in the Daily Mail, they had this photo. Photographer captures heartbreaking image of Arctic polar bear which starved to death as a result of climate change. And they've got this picture of the carcass of a polar bear, and it's in a very deteriorated state. And they're out there captioning that climate change forced this bear to starve to death. There's no way to know that. They're just telling you what to think looking at this picture. We don't know if the polar bear was shot. We don't know if the polar bear simply got old and died. We don't know if the polar bear ate some sea life that was contaminated with Fukushima radiation or fracking fluid. We don't know. There's nothing in the picture that tells us what this polar bear died of. He may have just died of old age. But they're going to come on out there and say, oh, see, climate change killed this polar bear. They love the polar bears. That's their mascot for human-caused global warming. And there's nothing in the picture to support that claim. But you will believe, as the carbon Nazis tell you to believe. You are all sinners. The blood of that polar bear is on your hands, and you will atone by paying your carbon taxes. Getting on back to Flint, Michigan, and we are seeing from more and more experts saying that Flint, Michigan is not the only U.S. city this has happened to. We already know for certain it's happened up in Ohio, Baltimore, Boston, parts of New Orleans. And you should be buying water testing kits and testing your water right now. This is not going to go away. So the fingers are pointing over in Michigan, and now it's come down to the latest revelation. The Flint City Council never approved changing the water supply from the Detroit Clean Water System to the Flint River. This was done apparently unilaterally at the discretion of Flint's emergency manager, whose only agenda was cutting costs to keep the bankers happy. That was it. And on that authority of lowering costs, they basically pumped toxic, damaging water through the city water system. And it was never approved of by the Flint City Council, according to their records of city council meetings. So they're off the hook. But it should be a reminder that all of this austerity that's coming on in, about allowing the bankers to manage our cities for us, what are they going to do? They're going to manage the cities for their maximum profitability, not for the benefit of the people. Flint, Michigan proved how dangerous and deadly it is to let money junkies be in charge of safety and health considerations. We saw the same thing in the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, where the desire for profits led to turning a blind eye to the fact that the manual blowout preventer on the Deepwater Horizon was 4 years overdue for regular maintenance. We saw the same thing in Fukushima, where money junkies cut back on the safety preparations and allowed that disaster to happen. Same thing at WIP, same thing at Hanford, same thing going on at Indian Point. Same thing that happened in San Onofre. When you go back and you look at the results of these disasters, somewhere early on is a money junkie saying, we can save this money by not doing this. And the money junkies are perfectly happy for your children to be drinking toxic water that permanently damages their brain as long as there's a fast buck in it. Finally, last note here, interesting article over at Amazon.com. Why you should actually read those terms of services pages. They know you're not reading them, so they put stuff in there. And I'm not kidding you. In the Amazon terms of service, section 5710, acceptable use. Let's see. This restriction will not apply in the event of the occurrence certified by the United States Centers for Disease Control or successor body of a widespread viral infection transmitted via bites or contact with bodily fluids that causes human corpses to reanimate and seek to consume living human flesh. In other words, their terms of service cover the zombie apocalypse. Somebody was having fun with that one. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay informed. Stay skeptical, make good choices, keep your eyes out for massive election fraud tomorrow on Super Tuesday. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.